again, what we're doing is we call it State of the Road, and we do that because at some point in time we provide the information to the Board of Commissioners. Ultimately, they have to approve the projects that we're letting out for next year, 2026. The Department of Roads, they forecast these things 2-3 years out based upon federal funding, based on state funding, and our own funding, and working with our locals. What projects do we need to really focus on? So now we're at a point where 2026, we need to talk about, put those projects forward to get the approval. And it's a year after year, we tend to get the approval, but there's always a lot of conversation at the board committees to kind of get an understanding as to, is this the best use of the roads? And most oftentimes they agree with it, because that's what the locals are agreeing upon as well. And you all know there's a whole lot of roads to fix. And the governor often talked about, fixing the damn roads, and I've always said, there isn't a damn road or a damn bridge we can't fix if they fix the funding. And so we've come to the realization that we're now at that point where there has been a change in the road funding model. And it's going to be very helpful, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the main reason we're here is to kind of give you some highlights about 2025, what we committed to, what the success of that was, and some of the highlights of what's going to be happening in 2026. And that's why I have John Hall-Ray, one of my deputy executives here, as well as Brian Santo, the director of the Department of Roads. And I think we've kind of been looked at around the state as being that agency or kind of county that has a lot of information and is willing to have a lot of conversation with our state and federal partners, but also even through the media to the public about what really is happening with roads here. So this is why we're here today, and this is what we'll be talking about. Now, you'll notice that Macomb County isn't in control of every road in Macomb County. There are county roads that go throughout the entire county, obviously, but we mainly deal with a lot of the townships, their roads, and even their subdivisions. Local cities have separate funding from Act 51 that they deal with their local roads, but we still have county roads that go through their jurisdictions that we match and partner with to make those fixes as well, and even some of the villages. So 4,400 miles of roadways in Macomb County, and again, only about 41% of those roadways throughout the entire county are county roads. As I mentioned, some of them local, some of them private. So with that, next one here, you'll note that, I mentioned the state has finally changed some of the, direction as to the local road funding. There's always a lot of conversation. What do we do? How do we manage this? How do we fix it? Well, there was a time when the legislature was completely made up in the governor's office of Republicans. There was a time when the legislature was completely made up of Democrats, and the governor was a Democrat. It never got solved, the biggest challenge we had. Almost liken it to what happened with the F-15 fighter mission that we have at Selfridge Air Base. We kept talking about it, tried to find a replacement, it never happened, and probably one of the most, one of the things that you least would expect something to happen on is when you had a divided, House, Senate, Congress, and the president, and a governor that is, kind of a different party coming together to solve a problem. And next thing you know, we're getting F-15 fighters as a replacement. You would have never expected that, but it finally happened. When in the past we've had our governors aligned with presidents and full control of everything, and Democrats in entirety couldn't have it make it happen, nor could Republicans. Well, that's what we're seeing here when it comes to road funding. I've been around for 15 years watching this play itself out, and I've always said, fix the funding. We can start fixing these roads and get ahead of this problem. Well, they finally decided to, make a move, and they came up with something that was significant and sustainable. So the significant funding that we're going to be getting, and it's going to be sustainable. It's not a one-time hit, not for just like a year. Here's $500 million that we're spread out statewide, funneled through Act 51. This is separate. It's not going to be going through Act 51. Macomb County, we're looking at about additional $30 million to start. So that's just approximations. We're still trying to filter through all those numbers. The question is, what does that $30 million mean? Well, talking to some of those that understand this, Brian, Scott, and the rest of the team, there's that $30 million isn't going to go very far when you're looking at all the road projects countywide. We're maybe moving some of those projects forward that we're thinking about in 2027, 28. A lot of conversation need to be had about that. We're looking at doubling our preservation programming, and preservation programming is, I believe it's like $4 million for asphalt, $4 million for concrete. That's $8 million a year. They're looking at enhancing that or doubling that, and that's significant. That's important, because what you don't want is good roads, start to turn into the fare of the poor sooner than they really need to be. So preservation is hugely important, and we're going to be committing a lot of money into those projects or that programming. Even neighborhood stabilization, meaning taking care of those subdivision roads in and around the county. And so culverts are our challenge. Bridges, there's a separate pot of money for that we're going to be very competitive with. So all of that means it's going to be less than $30 million by the time we start looking at how we start to peel this apart. What do we need to do? We're fortunate. We've had great working relationships with all of our local partners, our city, all the city officials, the mayors, the councils. We've had great working relationship with the township supervisors and the trustees, as well as obviously the local municipalities and the villages. So having those conversations has been important, but now we are going to be, within the next 2 weeks, have a conversation with all of them. We're bringing them all in, have a conversation as to what do we think we have available for funding moving forward, and how do we want to parcel that out so that we have some kind of agreements as we start to move forward here in Macomb County. I don't know if that happens in other counties, but here we make sure that we're closely connected and tied to them, so there's no arguing over the lack of road funding, and one isn't getting more than the other, but we're also prioritizing the roads as we see fit to try to figure out how do we get ahead of this problem. So, with that, the Act 51 money that we have, as I mentioned, is getting us about 1 to 3% to the good, to the fair over time. It just wasn't enough. I mean, it really didn't make a big difference for people that are driving on the roads. They're like, okay, we really don't see the impact. Now what we're anticipating with this new funding coming in is about a 6 to 8% to the good, which is great to see. And I think people are going to start to recognize that. But again, it doesn't mean that next year everybody's going to be upset about the orange barrels. They're going to be, oh my God, all these road projects happening. It's a good thing, and they need to be mindful so that we're making sure that our road construction workers are coming home safe. But with that being said, there is going to be a lot more work happening, as we start to go through the next several years. And over time, I think we're going to see that it's going to have a huge impact on our roads here in Macomb County because of this new funding. And so with that, I think I'm going to bring up Brian, and Brian's going to talk a little bit about the road projects and what we're doing. Oh, I'm sorry, JP. This is JP. It's my name. So Don Paul's going to talk a little bit about what our responsibilities are and what we do with road funding here in Macomb County.
Mark, thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this conversation and illustrate the collective commitment that we've had to not only understanding how we're investing in the roads and bridges across Macomb County, but the holistic responsibilities we have through the Department of Roads, our transportation service agency, how we service all of the communities in Macomb County. We've always taken a data-driven approach to understanding the assets that we have and ensuring all the dollars that we got are effectively deployed to projects, programs, and priorities throughout our county to ensure that we're continually driving down the persistent need that we see in our road network. When we see that $2.6 billion that we need to have to invest all the analytics that we've done in our asset management system, that's how we're able to scale up, work with our local partners, bring in our partners on the road building side and the engineering firms, and all of that knowledge horsepower that we have to understand how we can deploy at a foundational level as we look to 2026, the initial $73 million that we're going to put in our road, bridge, and traffic improvements. But as Mark has highlighted, as we have this $30 million, we have the ability to scale and take those 81 primary and local road projects, those 8 bridges, those 47 pavement preservation initiatives, and the 25 subdivision streets, and begin to have an impact and build our roads and bridges for tomorrow. Another key element of this is how we're keeping the motorists informed. And Brian's going to get into more to our core program, which has been a key element of how we're not only working with local elected officials and boards and commissions, but I think most importantly how we're informing residents as far as the impact that we have and the strategic role that we play as a Department of Roads. And when we look at how we serve our community, I think this is one of the most key elements that echoes up what Mark said, is how we truly are an innovator and a leader with regards to developing modern infrastructure for tomorrow. As a road agency, it's just not putting together engineering drawings of what a road looks like. It's just not coordinating with a road builder to ensure that we're out there inspecting. It's the entire life cycle of a road design and a project delivery where our team at the Department of Roads is intricately involved. That whether it's the designing and scoping of a project to ensure that the roadway that we're going to build will have the greatest positive impact for that community. Whether it's looking at planning and implementing road projects of tomorrow and seeing how it scales in from community to community. Whether it's analyzing all the ideal construction elements that we can bring and the value add, that whether it's design build or using some other modern types of practices that are part of the relationships that we have with our road builders and local engineering firms. Whether it's managing the thousands of service requests that come into our Department of Roads, and we always love hearing the passions of our residents, whether it comes to the condition of a roadway or the ability that we can partner with a local subdivision association or even a local community. We take this to heart every single day and look at deploying that holistic solution to all of the assets that are under our responsibility. And when we look at that, as Mark has highlighted, the 1,700 miles of roads that are under our unilateral jurisdiction, the 226 bridges that we're monitoring day in, day out, the culverts, which are an intricate element, as Mark has highlighted, that tie into not only our residents, but also into the structures that we have. The 900 traffic signals, which are a key element of not only our traffic operations and the safety that we have with our ITS system and our traffic signals. This is a key component of that holistic transportation network that we are innovating and investing in every single day. And as we not only look to highlight the successes that we had in our 2025 project and look forward to 2026, I think what Brian and the team are going to highlight next is the ability for us to respond to this demand, to put together modern approaches that are going to have the greatest impact to our community. But most importantly, it's about listening and engaging all of those advocates and champions that we have across the entire community. So I'm going to throw it over to Brian. Brian's going to go over the entire project list, the successes that we had in 25, teeing up for 26, and looking at all the programs that we have impacting our community. Brian.
Thanks, JP.
To start, just want to say safety, safety, safety. Safety is the #1 goal and objective of the Department of Roads when it comes to the Waterway Public and our roadway infrastructure. And how do we do that? How do we achieve that safety goal and objective? It's through sustainable funding. And that sustainable funding is through Act 51 funds, through the new revenue sharing that they produce to the state, which is great as an agency that we are. You can look at some of our construction programs that we have that highlight the safety. We have construction projects, just to capsule new road construction, road rehab, road reconstruction. We have a local bridge program, obviously road bridge rehab replacements. We have pavement preservation projects, asphalt concrete that Executive Hackle had mentioned, preservation, stretch crack sealing and chip sealing. We have a subdivision reconstruction program that gets into the more local community roads. We do have a sub-preservation program that we added last year. It's very integral to what we do, getting into the more rural and subdivision roadways that we do. We have a limestone program with our 7 northern communities. That's a great program for those communities that have gravel roads. We have a non-motorized path program, a maintenance program that deals with all of our maintenance activities, gravel road pavement, or maintaining, and such. We have a roadside ditch program that we added this year. That is very important to a lot of the communities as far as activity on roadside ditches and cleanouts. Go to the next slide. Partnerships and communication. We rely on the 3 C's: collaboration, coordination, and communication. We reach out to the partnerships that we have with communities, with the Executive Office, with the Board of Commissioners, with SEMCOG, with Federal Highway Administration, with the local communities and the community leaders, as well as the residents and motorists of Macomb County, to build what programs we have and the community partnerships that we have. This year, we can highlight that we collaborated with 17 Macomb County municipalities on our projects in 2025. We had 20 Department of Roads projects that were completed this year with those partnerships. $6.2 million in state funding that was utilized, $65.1 million in federal funding that was utilized in 2025 for our projects. Overall, $85 million in federal aid secured for our TIP, which is a transportation improvement program between the years of 23 and 26. That's very important to us as far as those relationships, that collaboration and outreach to the success of our road department when it comes to the safety of our roads in the community itself. Going on to the next slide, what everybody's here to look at, this is our 2025 committed project list. So this we went through last year as our anticipated projects. We're about 80% complete with our projects currently, finishing out the rest of the year in completion of these projects. So if you scroll through, and these are all found in the press release and can be found online on our website, macombgov.org/roads. As far as the committed projects list, there's a highlight sheet. Some of the projects, 10-mile roads, we have a reconstruct and rehabilitation. 14-mile road, we had a rehabilitation. On Garfield Road, we had a total reconstruction in Fraser. 32-mile road, that's a bridge superstructure replacement. We did have a major bridge replacement on South River Road. And Utica Road over the Red Run Drain was a major bridge rehabilitation project. Now, looking forward to our 2026 projects, once again, a comprehensive list can be found in the press release and online. But some of the highlights of our upcoming 2026 projects. You can look at Romeo Plank Road. It's a reconstruct from 2 to 5 lanes between 21.5 and 23-mile road. Overall project cost of $16.5 million. Broughton Road, that's a new section of roadway between 23.5 and 24 mile road, 24.5. That's a cost of $7 million. That's a new roadway reconstruction. Rosso Highway, that's in relationship to Selford Air National Guard. That's the relocation of Selford to provide a runway expansion for the preparation of the F-15s that are coming into that facility. We do have a 21-mile road bridge replacement over the Salt Slang Galoti Drain. And then Shana Road, we have a deck replacement over the Red Run Drain. These are major projects and only highlights of the comprehensive list that you can find online and in the press release. The collaboration, once again, is the most important as far as this new funding source. As Executive Hackett said, we have a lot to discuss. We're still working out the details of how much money, how it's going to be delivered, and when it's going to be delivered. But that collaboration is important in communication between ourselves internally and the locals moving forward as best as possible. Last point to touch on, our current bridge conditions, which have been improving, and thanks to our staff for that also. We have fair good, we have 90%, we have 226 bridges, we have 203 in good condition, we have 4%, 9 in poor, in critical and serious. That's not that they're falling apart, but we have to load post them. We are working on fixing those with our new programs moving forward, and that injection of new money will definitely help improve our bridge condition overall. So that's the recap of what we have upcoming for next year.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Mark?
Yeah, and I think that we talked about the bridge program, or whatever. That's there's a separate pot of money that the state has set aside. I believe it's $100 million set aside for obviously locals could speak on based upon the needs of the bridges that they're seeing as far as critical needs of replacement and the serious repair. So with that, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about that 1 to 3% to the good, and basically if you look at the whole objective here is to try to figure out how do we lessen the number of poor roads that we have in Macomb County, or that percentage. As you can see, if you start looking at the percentage, it starts to dramatically decrease because of the work that we're doing on pavement preservation when we fix a road, but also when we start obviously building or reconstructing the road itself. You'll note that as time goes by, we're starting to see that we're anticipating with that new funding coming in that it is going to be a significant change. You're going to see about 6 to 8% to the good. So we're trying to figure out how do we continue to keep those roads in sterile condition and or make sure that we're reestablishing and put them in good condition, but lessen the impact on the poor roads that we're seeing throughout this county. And as I always say, every day we walk around, somebody's always complaining about their roadway, but I can identify one that's probably worse than the one they're talking about. And it becomes a challenge to try to figure out how do we solve those problems. But now I think with this new road funding, we have a bigger or greater impact. And it's also going to help us focus on those neighborhood roads, which was something that was creative kind of by our Department of Roads working with the locals and what we call that neighborhood stabilization program. So again, from the driveway to the highway, there's going to be a huge impact on what's happening with roads here in Macomb County because of the new funding and work that's being done with the Department of the Roads. Also, I think here we want to talk a little bit more about, I think JP is going to talk about the traffic, kind of the infrastructure that we have above ground. We often lose sight of that. We are so far ahead right now with connected corridors, connected highways in Macomb County than any other county, I dare say, in North America. It's amazing how far we've come with the ability to have our vehicles communicate, or our infrastructure communicate the vehicles. We all talk about that vehicle infrastructure that's out there that industry is working on, but they have capabilities, these vehicles that they're putting on our roadways, to communicate with our traffic signals, with our systems that we have. And so we have embedded some incredible technology here to help us keep the driving experience even more safe, and a lot of that is credit to John Abraham and the team that they have working with the IT portions of what goes on. JP is going to highlight a few of those things that are happening here in Macomb County with the infrastructure. I love it.
Mark, as you've said a multitude of times over the years, we need to understand where industry is headed and make sure we have the technology that's embedded. When we look at the way in which we deploy these advanced technologies, it is all geared towards the narrative that Brian highlighted earlier, safety. Every single one of these technological deployments makes our roadways more safer and more efficient. And when we look at scaling in all these different elements, that whether it's a fully connected intersection that ties in here to ComTech and ensures that our traffic operations personnel can coordinate with dispatch and sheriffs and first responders, each one of these elements ensures that whether we're managing traffic flow during high peak times, whether we've got to switch over operations during a major construction project, or whether we need to guide first responders to when there is an incident on our roadways, We have some of the most advanced technology that you will see in all of North America, if not of the globe. This has been a major priority for Brian, Scott, Johnny, and the entire team over on our traffic operations, because what we've started to realize is, as we look at completing each one of these installations, it gives us more capabilities to not only manage our roadways, understanding the increased transportation that we're seeing as our population and business activity continues to thrive across Macomb County, but most importantly, leveraging dollars. And I think this is a testament to the approach that we've had at the Department of Roads, that anytime there's an opportunity for us to apply to an innovative grant program, and that whether it's through federal partners, whether it's through the Michigan Department of Transportation, whether it's through SEMCOG, whether it's through transportation alternatives, this gives us the ability to scale and scope transportation projects, so we're deploying safer intersections, so we're keeping pedestrians in mind, so we're developing multimodal corridors that will be able to serve all users, and that will be integrated into the whole notion that public safety and the safety of our motorists is the #1 priority that we have. We always like to highlight this as one of the major champions that we have within our Department of Roads, because it also gives us an in with all of our transportation industry partners that we have across Macomb County, Southeast Michigan State. Mark, this is a key element, a foundational principle of how we're focused on safety and innovating traffic, and I think most importantly, how it really ties in to the commitment that we've had here at ComTech.
Very good. And as was talked about earlier, Brian mentioned it, Macomb.org for information. You can sign up, whether it's by text and or email. It's amazing the number of folks that have actually connected with us that are signed up on this app, and the hundreds of notifications that we put out yearly. So, I happen to have it on my phone. It's interesting. It's like every time I look at it, there's 2 or 3 new ones coming through. And it's kind of an advantage for people if you happen to be driving around those areas, especially in the northern part of the county. It really does provide you enough to better understand what's happening to avoid the area. So,
There are some days we wish he didn't have it on his phone.
sometimes I wish I didn't have a phone. So I always call it scan to the back fine. So, but with that, we're going to open it up. If you have any questions from the media, we'll be more than happy to address or entertain those questions.
I have a few.
Rick?
It's probably hard to consolidate, but I'm going to ask you to try. So a lot of numbers up there, state funding, federal funding. We talked last week about the best news, if I heard you right, was the consistency of funding that will now be coming. Can you consolidate with state and federal monies how much Macomb has to work with, how much more perhaps on a percentage basis, or whether it's $30 million annually that you'll be able to get and count on as a result of this change in the budget? Or I'm trying to get my arms around how much in the net you guys work with and where it's coming from, because it looked like a variety of funding sources.
Yeah, great question. And we try to, in fact, I try to figure out how do we simplify that question. So in other words, as we start talking amongst ourselves and half the county Department of Roads, we're hearing so many different pots of money and what that might mean, whatever. So we kind of all came to the agreement of how we're going to address that question if it came. And basically, let's just say from Act 51, we're talking about $80 million a year we're getting in Act 51 funds to help us deal with issues throughout the county with roads. That's the money that comes from the state machine. With that being said, we're looking at the new money that's coming in now with this legislative decision to finally solve a problem with sustainable road funding. And we're anticipating around $30 million to start. So that we know that's going to increase incrementally year after year. So, the question becomes, how does that get divvied out? That $80 million is something that, $80 million isn't just going into new roads. $80 million is going into preservation. $80 million is used for culverts. $80 million is used for a multitude of things, where we try to figure out, in kind of an estimation, let's just say there's $40 million available out of the $80 million for road projects that we get to partner with other communities. As we partner with these communities, most of the time it's 50-50 match, unless there's federal funding available for a particular project that gets recognized. The feds will inject about 80% of the funding into it. Now we split the other 20, 50-50 with the locals. So we're trying to stretch those dollars from Act 51 a little bit further. When it comes to this new funding, that's not, there really is no restriction, there is no requirement to do a match. So that $30 million coming in, we've come to realize, hang on a second, we've got to do something with that $30 million first. And I think you really recognize that pavement preservation. So if you're talking about $8 million added to pavement preservation, now you're down to about $22 million. We talk about culverts that we need to fix to make sure there's money available to fix these culverts. I'm down to about $20 million. We're looking at some of the neighborhood stabilization. What are we going to do about the neighborhoods? Make sure we take care of those subdivisions. And is it going to be a match with those communities, or is it going to be a direct, funding for that to help them through that? So now that 20 million countywide additional funding kind of got lessened, and now the question is we're bringing the locals together to start having the dialogues to figure out how do we want to stretch those dollars, or are we all going to speak to 20 million and figure out how do we argue what roads need to be fixed that is a priority? Or do we take that additional 20 million and start moving projects that we have set up for the next 2-3 years based upon Act 51? Do we start moving those forward? So basically what we're looking at is $80 million supposed to get for Act 51. New money is just going to be about 30 million, but it's really not, 1.1 billion going into 110 million going into actual road projects. So very complex issue to kind of get your arms wrapped around or understanding, but it definitely going to end it.
I'd like to follow on that exact question about communities. Twofold, same type of question. How do you know as a county what your allocation will be? Meaning, how does the state divvy up this tax? Is it based on population? Is it based on road traffic? And then when we talk about your job locally, how do communities lobby for this? How do neighborhoods lobby for this? Are you guys the arbiters?
I think we're still using lane miles as how they're deciding the actual funding, much like you do with Act 51. Well, I should say that Act 51 is a little bit different.
Center line.
Yeah. So they're doing a single lane, or are they doing
Center line
multi-lane?
miles.
Center line miles.
Okay, right. So it's still a bit of a challenge as far as the funding coming that way. But local communities, as Brian was talking about, we have a committee that comes together and have these conversations. If you want to touch on that real quick. So.
Yeah, as far as our core program, our community outreach and education program, that's where the rubber meets the road as far as the needs and wish lists and desires of the communities and the residents within those communities. So it's a collaborative effort. Like I said, the 3 C's, coordination, communication, and collaboration. That's the meat and potatoes of how we move forward with our projects, where this new injection of money goes, or at least a portion of it. We have some funds that we can put it towards as far as preservation and kind of putting it to immediate use once we get that funding. So that's still being worked out as far as total amount, how we get it, when we get it. That's still being deciphered and disseminated by our staff as well as the state and federal highways.
So we're taking a look at it first, trying to figure out, okay, what are our priorities as we see it county-wide based upon everything we're hearing from everybody? Pavement preservation is number one. So we are going to make sure that funding is set aside for that. But as they compete, as Brian said, we like to have conversations with all of them before we decide how that money is going to be spent. Because as you can imagine, we always get the 1 or 2 that want to call us and tell us we need to do this with their project. But I always say, well, if you're going to say that, let's say it within earshot of everyone else, because they're certainly going to have some of their own questions or concerns, and they're going to say, hang on a second, I don't know that your need is as story as my need. So having them all together and having these conversations, I think we have better dialogue, and nobody's being treated unfairly, or nobody's getting something that they shouldn't be getting unfairly as well. So, JP, if you want to talk about that funding, because you followed that all the way through, how we got to where we're at, and kind of where they made that decision as to how we get 30 million.
Yeah, Mark, it's been an interesting process as far as the eligibility and the deployment of funds. As Brian has highlighted, the state developed this data schema where it's based on center lane mile roads that comes to us on that end. The other interesting thing is the eligible projects that will be able to scope the locals. I think this is one of the key elements where as we've worked with the legislature to understand how we can enterprise those dollars, whether through its existing programs. As Brian has highlighted, we've had our federal aid committee, which continues to petition projects so we can get our share from the feds. The ability for us to eventually advance and instruct those and deploy those dollars even more. I think the other thing that we're always looking to do too, as both Mark and Brian has highlighted too, is expand those dollars to the existing pavement preservation. So when we look at that foundational pool of about $111 million, how it's going to really help us really push these and advance these construction forwards. The other thing that I think is critical that we discussed too is the $100 million that the state has set aside for critical bridge structures. We've got about a 5-year window where we not only have committed bridge projects, but making sure we're getting those projects eligible, we're getting our fair share of those resources, and we're illustrating that we actually have closed structures in our communities, how those will not only help open up roadways, how those will also protect waterways that we cover on that end, and how they're part of the way in which we're putting and innovating the ways that we deploy culverts and structures to have the least adverse impact on freshwater medicines to CADA. This is something that we've been involved in the foundational level. The advocacy that we took early on, illustrating to the state that we need to fix the funding to fix the roads. Now we're taking a step in the right direction, but most importantly, we're prepared to deploy those dollars with the inputs from our locals.
my last question, in a summary sense, how would you message out to people in the community as well as community leaders expectations? Meaning, this is all good news, more consistent funding, but yet maybe, I don't know if you need to temper it. I mean, this isn't, panacea that's not going to answer everything, but yet the progress that can be made. I mean, what would be your message in regard to we have good news here, but yet slow it down maybe, perhaps?
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's kind of the conversation we had immediately when we realized it was additional road funding. It's okay, there is no question. It's significant and it's going to be substantial. Well, it's sustainable. I mean, this year after year, recognize this funding is coming our way. But we do want to temper the expectations of the public, thinking that all of a sudden all the roads are going to be fixed. That there's two forms. You don't want to figure out how do you fix them all at once because it's such complete chaos. People are often complaining about some of the road projects we have because it's difficult to get around. We have two competing projects that really cause people to go out of their way. Maybe sometimes competing with the same project or competing with a local project. So that being said, there are challenges that we always face when doing construction. There's going to be more construction out added to that. But suffice it to say, we are going to see an impact as time goes on. Which roads and fewer roads being poor condition here in Macomb County over time, and people are going to see that we're going to be eventually getting ahead of this. But it's not going to be overnight. They're not just going to all of a sudden wake up that morning and say, "Oh my gosh, all roads are better here." All these conditions. That's not the case. We're no different between Oakland and Macomb. We're all in this together. The biggest challenge we're faced with is making sure people understand this is going to take some time. And let's face it, local cities, they got a bump in their road funding too. So the cities are now going to be fixing some of their roads, some of their neighborhoods because of this increased funding they've got. But that being said, they still partner with us on county roads that are in some of those cities as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty significant over time. But I would say again, over time, it's going to be the key on the side story.
Thank you.
Anything else? Good. All good. Thank you very much. We all appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it.